I know exactly what's happening right now. You clicked on this video because your algorithm figured out that you're stuck. Maybe you've had this video sitting in your Watch Later playlist for days. Or maybe you're watching it right now while procrastinating something you should have finished yesterday. And that's okay. I'm not here to give you a lecture on toxic positivity or tell you to just want it badly enough. I'm just a guy who understands what it's like to be run over by a self-destructive routine. The problem isn't that you're lazy. The problem is that you're trying to solve a systems problem with a dose of motivation, and motivation is the most unstable fuel there is. If you're exhausted from feeling stuck, don't close this video. I don't want you to finish watching and feel inspired. I want you, 10 minutes from now, to have actually done something that changed your current situation. Let's move from later to right now, because there's an uncomfortable truth that almost nobody realizes. Life rarely changes when you make a big decision. It changes when you take an action so small that your brain doesn't even notice you've just crossed a point of no return. And before you assume this is just another motivational speech, I'm going to prove it to you. In the next few minutes, you're going to discover why you keep ending up in the same place, and the invisible mechanism that's keeping you exactly where you are. The do something principle, the cure for paralysis. Most people fail to break out of a rut because they believe in a linear lie. Inspiration, motivation, action. They sit on the couch, scrolling through their phones, waiting for an epiphany, a miraculous motivational video, or a moment of clarity that will finally make them get up and change their lives. But here is the brutal truth that the comments on my channel make crystal clear. Inspiration is not a prerequisite for action. It is a byproduct of action. When you are stuck, your brain enters an energy conservation mode. The physical inertia you feel is a reflection of your mental inertia. Your brain follows its own version of Newton's first law. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. The only way to break that state is not through a dramatic mindset shift. It is through minimal friction. What I call the do something principle is the art of choosing a task so ridiculously small and seemingly pointless that your brain has no argument against doing it. If you need to clean the house, do not look at the house. Look at the sink. If the sink feels overwhelming, look at a single glass. Tell yourself, I'm just going to put this glass in the dishwasher and nothing else. Sounds silly. That is exactly why it works. The goal of this principle is not productivity itself. It is momentum. The moment you stand up to wash that glass, your brain shifts from inactive mode into execution mode. And this is where the magic happens. Once you are in motion, the energy required to keep moving is dramatically lower than the energy required to start. A lot of you comment that you already do this, but you are doing it with the wrong intention. You try to do the something while already thinking about everything that needs to happen afterward. That is a mistake. When you commit to the minimum task, you have to let go of control over what comes next. I used to do this all the time myself. I would think, I am going to get up and wash this glass. But the very next second, my mind was already calculating that afterward, I would have to wash the entire sink, organize the kitchen, wipe down the counters, and handle 10 other things. Suddenly, a 30-second task felt like running a marathon, so I would quit before I even started. If after washing the glass you want to go back to bed, do it without guilt. The goal is not to force yourself to finish everything. The goal is simply to make the first move. But most of the time, you will notice something interesting. After washing the glass, you do not want to go back to bed anymore. Because you are already on your feet, your brain naturally starts looking for the next small task. Wipe the counter, put away a plate, straighten up a corner of the table. That is how action works. It does not come from motivation. It creates motivation. Do you see the difference? You do not need a life-changing epiphany to take a shower or start a project. You just need a simple physical action. Stop waiting for motivation to knock on your door. It will not. It is already outside, waiting for you to start moving so it can catch up with you. In fact, let us run a little experiment right now. If your brain is saying, I will subscribe and leave a like later, congratulations. You have just demonstrated the exact problem we are talking about. So do it now, not because I need it. Because you need to stop turning 2-second tasks into future plans. Action is not the result of motivation. Action is the spark that starts the fire. Here's a secret that few people tell you. Your brain is not a team working in perfect harmony. In fact, sometimes it feels more like a condo meeting where nobody agrees with anyone. For the purpose of changing habits, imagine that there are two sides arguing inside your head all the time. On one side, you have the prefrontal cortex. This is the logical, ambitious part, the one that watched this video and decided that starting tomorrow they will wake up at 5 in the morning, read 50 pages a day, start going to the gym, learn a new skill, and finally get their life on track. It's the part that makes plans. It's the part that sets goals. And it's also the part that loves to nag you when things don't go as planned. On the other side, there is what we will call the primal brain, the oldest part of the system. The part that is not concerned with success, productivity, or personal fulfillment. She only wants one thing: to expend as little energy as possible and avoid any unnecessary discomfort. Therefore, when you decide to change everything at once, that part doesn't see any growth. She sees danger. For her, trading hours of Netflix for exercise, study, and discipline doesn't seem like progress. It looks like a scam. And she reacts like any employee who receives 3 new positions without a salary increase, with resistance. That's where the mistake most people make comes in. They became their own overseers. They use logic to declare war on their own brains. Starting today, I'm going to change everything. No excuses, without rest, flawless. It seems like determination. But to its primal brain, it looks like a threat. And when he feels threatened, he fights back. He doesn't show up with a sign saying, "I'm sabotaging you." It would be even easier if it were that way. Instead, it becomes more sophisticated. It makes you tired. It makes you feel sleepy. He convinces you that 5 minutes on Instagram is a great idea. And before you know it, those 5 minutes have turned into a 45-minute expedition through videos you don't even remember why you started watching. That's why so many people are able to be productive for 2 or 3 days. And then he plunges into an even worse period of procrastination, not because there was a lack of willpower, but because he tried to win a negotiation using only force. And too much force usually generates too much resistance. The solution is not imposition. The solution is negotiation. To break free from a destructive routine, you need to treat this emotional part of the brain as you would treat a frightened child. You don't drag a child by the arm yelling, "Be productive." You earn her trust first. So imagine that you applied the do something principle. She washed the dishes. He made the bed. He organized a small part of the room. And then that voice comes along saying that he's tired. Who wants to stop? Because today is not the day. Listen to that voice for a moment. It doesn't mean obeying her. It means to recognize her. Be grateful for the small victory, and allow the activity to end there if necessary. It seems contradictory, I know, because you want to resolve everything today. But when you choose to stop after a small victory, you send 3 very important messages to your brain. First, I heard you. Second, this was not a punishment. Third, you remain safe. You remain in control. And it is precisely at this moment that something curious happens. The following day, the brain offers less resistance, because now he no longer associates action with suffering. He associates action with something bearable. And lasting habits are not built through force. They are built on trust. This compassionate negotiation does something very important. It reduces the fear your brain has of productivity. And this may seem strange at first glance, but think about it. For a long time, I didn't realize that. I thought my problem was a lack of discipline. So I tried to compensate by pushing myself harder and harder. And maybe you do that too. You spend days procrastinating and then decide that on Monday you're going to make up for it all. You're going to wake up early. Go study, go train. You'll organize your entire life in 24 hours. That's exactly what I used to do. And the result was always the same. 2 or 3 days of absurd performance, followed by an equally absurd fall. Today I understand the reason. Without realizing it, I was teaching my brain that productivity was synonymous with suffering. Every time I started, I pushed myself to the limit. Then my brain started associating action with exhaustion, and honestly, if every time someone invited you out you came home completely exhausted, how long would it take you to start making excuses not to go out? That's exactly what happens here. When you learn to stop before you're exhausted, something changes. You don't create a traumatic experience. You don't reinforce the idea that productivity means endless suffering. On the contrary, you show your brain that there is a way out, that he will not be dragged through hours of exertion until he can't take it anymore. And I can tell you from personal experience that it works. Not just with me. I've seen people close to me go through the same process. When they stopped turning every attempt at change into a war, it became much easier to come back the next day. Because the brain stopped expecting suffering. He came to expect a bearable experience, and that changes everything. Because the resistance is lower the following day. In the other one too, you're not just building habits. You are building trust. He is proving to himself that he can act without destroying himself in the process. Ultimately, productivity isn't about who can accomplish the most in a single day. It's about who can keep moving forward without collapsing at the end of the week. So stop being the judge who only shows up to deliver the sentence. Start being the mentor who wants to see you succeed in the long run. Because consistent people don't necessarily have more willpower. Often, they simply learn to work with their own brains instead of declaring war against them. There's a curious trap that catches almost everyone who's trying to start over. The person finally finds the energy to act and thinks, now I'm going to make up for lost time. And that's exactly where she gets lost again. Because recovery doesn't work like revenge against the past. You don't wake up on a Monday and pay off an emotional debt that has accumulated over months. But that's what many people try to do. She turns an ordinary day into a military operation. Academia, diet, cleaning, studies, organization, goals, spreadsheets, and before lunch she's already mentally exhausted. The most ironic thing is that the person believes they failed because they did too little, when in reality he failed because he tried to do everything. That's why there's an extremely powerful concept in the world of bodybuilding called progressive overload. The logic is simple. No one walks into a gym for the first time and tries to lift the weight they'd like to lift 2 years from now. That would be ridiculous. And it would probably end in injury. But when it comes to productivity, people do exactly that. They demand from the current version a performance that belongs to a future version. Progressive overloading works because it respects reality. She asks only one thing. What can you afford to sustain today? Not what you used to do. Not what I would like to do. What can you afford to sustain today? This is your starting point. Maybe today is just a matter of taking a shower. Maybe it's organizing a drawer. Maybe it's replying to that one message you've been avoiding for days. It seems like a small amount. But that's small compared to whom? Because if you didn't manage to do anything yesterday, then that already represents progress. Then movement always triumphs over immobility. Now comes the most important part. Tomorrow you don't try to be 10 times better. You try to be slightly better. Almost ridiculously better. If you walked for 5 minutes, walk for 6. If you washed 1 glass, wash 2. If you studied 1 page, study 2. The idea isn't to impress anyone. The idea is to make progress so easy that your brain doesn't feel the need to go into defense mode. Because every time you manage to repeat an action, you are sending a silent message to yourself. I am a person who perseveres, and that's worth more than any burst of motivation. In practice, the goal is not to have perfect days. The goal is to never have to start over from scratch. Because there is a huge difference between walking slowly and stopping completely. And most people don't fail because they walk slowly. She fails because she spends her entire life alternating between sprinting and exhaustion, between obsession and abandonment, between everything and nothing. Progressive overload breaks this cycle. She trades intensity for consistency. He trades heroism for repetition. He trades grand promises for small, accumulated victories. And that's precisely why it works. Because major transformations rarely seem big while they're happening. Most of the time, they just look like someone doing one simple thing every day. for long enough for life to start changing on its own. There's a rule so simple it seems silly. And perhaps that's precisely why it works. Never skip 2 days in a row. I'm not saying to never fail. You will fail. I'm going to fail. Everyone makes mistakes. The issue is not about avoiding the fall. The challenge is to prevent falling from becoming a lifestyle, because the problem was never losing a day. The problem is what happens in your head after that. You skip training on a Tuesday, eat poorly on weekends. He spends an entire afternoon procrastinating. And suddenly that thought comes to mind. Ready. I've already ruined everything. Now I'll start again next week, or next month, or next year. It's funny how our brains turn a small mistake into an official resignation ceremony. A habit isn't broken when you miss a day. It is destroyed when you use that day as an excuse to abandon all the others. That's why an idea by James Clear struck me so much. He says that the first mistake is rarely the problem. The problem is always the second one. Because the first one is an accident. The second one is starting to become a pattern. And when you understand that, the goal changes completely. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to go back as quickly as possible, even if it's in a ridiculously small way. If you couldn't complete the full workout, do 5 minutes. If you couldn't study for an hour, read a page. If you couldn't write the entire chapter, write a paragraph. Because in those moments, you are not training productivity. You are practicing rebound. And the ability to return may be more important than the ability to begin. Safety mode. For a long time, I believed that consistency meant doing your best every day. Today, I think exactly the opposite. Consistency is knowing what to do when you can't give your best. That's what safe mode is for. The days when you are tired. The days when life ran you over. The days when there simply isn't enough energy. On those days, you don't give up the habit. You reduce its size. Because a reduced habit is still a habit. An abandoned habit is a different story. And there's a psychological reason why this works. When you maintain a minimal version of your routine, you send a silent message to yourself. I'm still here. I'm still that kind of person. I haven't strayed from the path yet. It seems like a small thing. But it is precisely the small connection that prevents entire weeks of self-sabotage. Stop relying so heavily on motivation. Now let me tell you something that took me years to understand. Many people don't have a discipline problem. They have an architectural problem. Their environment is programmed for failure. And then they blame their own willpower. The philosopher William James said that a large part of our lives is governed by automatic habits. Decades later, researchers and authors like James Clear popularized the same idea in a different way. You don't become what you want to be. You tend to become what you repeat. That's why the environment matters so much. If you want to study, but need to cross 3 rooms to find the material, your brain perceives this as a barrier. If you want to work out, but have to search for clothes, shoes, and a water bottle every time, there's a barrier. If you want to put your cell phone down, but it's literally within your reach 24 hours a day, there's a barrier. And the brain loves barriers when they serve as an excuse. Therefore, productive people are not always more disciplined. Often, they simply made the right decision easier. And the most difficult wrong decision. Identity changes everything. But there is an even deeper layer, the identity layer. Because ultimately, nobody changes their life just by completing tasks. People change when they begin to believe in a new story about who they are. The philosopher Aristotle said that we are what we repeatedly do. And even after more than 2,000 years, this idea remains frighteningly relevant today. You don't become organized when you feel like being organized. You become organized when you act like an organized person repeatedly. You don't become disciplined because you decided to on a Monday. You become disciplined when you accumulate small proofs that you can fulfill what you promised yourself. So stop thinking only about the task. Stop thinking, I need to wash these dishes, and start thinking, I am someone who takes care of their own space. Stop thinking, I need to train. And start thinking, I am someone who respects their own body. Because tasks are events, identities are stories. And the human brain always fights harder to protect a story than to complete a task. Ultimately, that's why some people are able to maintain changes for years. They're not just performing habits. They are reinforcing an identity every day, in silence, through small actions that seem insignificant. But when added together over time, these experiences end up completely transforming who they believe themselves to be. At the end of the day, routine is a cycle that is not broken with a battle cry, but with a whisper of decision. I gave you the map, but remember, the map does not walk for you. And, to be completely honest, I know that, as soon as this video ends, a part of you will want to go back to the watch later list and ignore everything we talked about. It's ironic, isn't it? We spend hours looking for the secret formula to escape inertia, when the formula is exactly the one thing we insist on avoiding: action without spectacle. So stop looking for the perfect epiphany. Your new self is not going to appear in a divine flash of light. It is going to appear in the next boring and tiny task that you decide to finish today with no audience and no applause. And just to make one thing clear, if you do not start today, your tomorrow will be exactly the same as your yesterday. And let's be honest. You already know that movie by heart, don't you? Now close YouTube. You have a glass to wash.